Bonfires burning bright, pumpkin faces in the night, dead cats hanging from poles, little dead are out in droves. It's Halloween. And today's episode is going to be a little different. We wanted to do something special, being that this is our 10th episode and it's the day before Halloween that it's going to be released. So we kind of went all out. We did a more personal story. This is a story about a house that Eric and I both spent a lot of time in when we were growing up, and it was weird. So we're bringing the story to you, and we're doing it in a different style than you're used to with Goose Pimples. This is more of a, I don't know, like an audio documentary style. I hope you enjoy it. We'll be back to normal next week. We'll be back to the standard Goose Pimples formula. We may mix some things up. We're going to try some new things moving forward. We're going to see how it works out, and hopefully it's going to be for the best. Again, this episode's a little different. I'm going to do all the stuff we normally do at the end, right up top. So if this story gives you Goose Pimples, please do us a favor and just share our podcast with your friends. That's the best thing you can do for us. We'll even say trick or treat. There, trick or treat. Share with your friends. If you think that you know somebody who might enjoy the stuff that we're talking about, anything helps. If you want to get in contact with us, if you want to send us your crazy stories, if you want to come on the podcast and tell your crazy stories, shoot us an email at goosepimplespodcast@gmail.com. We also want to let you know that this very special Halloween episode of Goose Pimples is brought to you by Parabox Monthly. Parabox has been great for us. They've been with us almost since episode 2, episode 3? I don't remember. But it's been a great relationship. They've helped us out a ton, and their products are killer. For just $19.95, you can head over to paraboxmonthly.com, get signed up for your first box. You'll get it in November. It's going to come with one awesome soft style quality t-shirt, and it's going to enter you into an online scavenger hunt. Now, the scavenger hunt isn't just a gimme. You're going to have to use your brain, trust me. These aren't easy, but they're awesome. And they're so satisfying if you can get to the end. Not only because you've proven yourself worthy, but because you're going to get free merchandise out of it. Well, you'll be entered to win free merchandise. Make sure, check our friends out at Parabox. It's paraboxmonthly.com, and you can use promo code GoosePimples, all one word, Goose Pimples, at checkout for 10% off your first box. Without further ado, I'm going to let you guys get to the episode. I want to thank everybody who reached out to me and was willing to let me interview them and appear on our show. They've been huge and they made this awesome. I also want to thank thedarkpiano.com. We use some music in this, and it's actually from thedarkpiano.com. It's a great royalty-free site. The songs we are using are Bad Encounters and Lights Out. Again, that's thedarkpiano.com. Check that out if you want some cool Halloween music or eerie ambience in the background while you're handing out candy. There you go. All right, guys. Again, here it is. Sorry. Happy Halloween. Love you. Bye. When I was growing up, I spent a majority of my time staying at my grandmother's house. My grandmother lived in a house on 11th Street in the neighborhood we grew up in. It was a great place to be a kid. It was a safe development with great neighbors and a bunch of kids who were my age running around town. When I was about 8, my mom moved into her own house. It was one street over on 10th. This 10th Street house would end up being the host for a myriad of strange events that are still shared at the dinner table anytime our family and extended family get together. I believe it's also the root of my interest in the paranormal and unexplained. There was something about it. It grabbed a hold of you. This house was frightening yet somehow comforting at the same time. It gave you a vibe of chilling yet warm, and for some people in my family, even a sense of safety. Now, the day my mom, my brother, Mike, and I moved into the house was not the first time that I'd been there, nor was it the first time that I'd felt the presence inside. This house was initially purchased by my cousin, Roy. Roy also happens to be the uncle of our wonderful co-host, Eric Arterbridge. Roy bought the house as a fixer-upper. He remodeled the interior and then used it as a rental property, eventually renting it to my mom. While working on it, Roy lived there himself, and as children, Eric and Ryan would stay there all the time, which was great for me. Being I only lived one street over, I was able to hop on my bike, cut through a few yards, and spend the day with my cousins. I remember one day in particular, not only because it was the first time I'd become aware of the strange goings-on in the house on 10th Street, but also because it ended up being a day that I met one of my best friends growing up, Ian. Ryan and Eric had met Ian while exploring the neighborhood. He lived in a house on the cul-de-sac at the end of 10th Street. He also lived next door to what would become the neighborhood hangout for all the kids my age, the Dirt Hill. Now, the Dirt Hill was, well, it was exactly what you would think. It was a dirt hill. I believe it had been left behind from construction of one of the newer houses on 10th Street. And even though to the adults it was just a pile of dirt, to us, it was a place for endless exploration. In fact, the first time I had met Ian, later that day, he was standing atop the dirt hill wearing a tool belt full of plastic tools. He informed Ryan, Eric, and I that he had found a piece of gold in the dirt hill, and now he was there looking for more. It was during that walk, my first walk to the dirt hill, my first walk to meet Ian, that Ryan informed me that he and Eric had seen something the night before. They'd spent the night at Roy's, in the spare bedroom.
Ryan says, when he talks about the story, he remembers staying awake most of the night and watching this light.
Well, I was going to say, I remember Ryan mentioning that the light either originated from or kind of went back to this old...
armoire.
Yeah, an armoire.
Yeah, that's right.
This bedroom that we're talking about didn't have a closet. Instead, it had this giant armoire that opened up and you could hang clothes, and in the bottom of it was a chest that opened up.
The things that I specifically remember are that there was a ball of light. I don't remember anything it did or where it went. It was at night, obviously, and my Uncle Roy and Aunt Denise sent us up to bed, and we were in bed. So all I really remember is that there was some kind of light floating around the bedroom. And, I mean, it was weird. I've never really seen a light floating around a bedroom before that, but I have seen some lights after that. But anyway... so we were freaked out, and we went downstairs to tell them, hey, there's some weird light floating around the bedroom. And the response was basically, oh, it's just somebody outside with a flashlight playing a trick on you. Just go back to bed. And we were like, that's not somebody outside with a flashlight. It's a light in the room, like a ball of light floating around.
The lights are the one thing that I saw personally with my own eyes. I felt a lot of weird things at this house, but the lights that Eric's talking about, I also saw.
Oh, I didn't know that you also saw the light there.
The only thing, like, tangible that I remember seeing at this house was the light in the bedroom. I remember waking up in the middle of the night and there being this, like you said, like this strange light just kind of really sporadic, like shooting kind of all over the room. And again, the armoire wasn't in that room anymore when I was there. My mom had taken it and moved it into her room. But I do remember the light. That's one of the few things that I do remember from the house that I've actually experienced. Now, the reason that I think maybe I didn't experience as much as some other people is because I kind of hightailed it out of there. After this happened with the lights, and like I said, I already got a weird vibe from the house, I started staying at my grandmother's more and more. And it became so frequent that I ended up basically just living there. My brother, on the other hand, he stuck around, and he had a few other experiences in the house. Some creepy stuff.
I don't know. I think this is the first time and the second time we lived there.
What he's referring to is at one point my mom moved out. She received a free apartment through the job she was working. So there was a period of maybe a year and a half where she wasn't living at the house and then eventually moved back in.
It was more weird the first time that we lived there because we didn't have so it's a townhouse. It was like an old farmhouse that was split in the middle. So there was another side to it. But the first time we lived there was no one who lived on the other side. And you could hear pots and pans banging all the time, like across from like where the laundry room was in our side of the townhouse. And we found out later on, like that's where the big kitchen used to be. So you could hear almost every night at like 7 o'clock, pots and pans starting to bang around. and there wasn't anyone who lived next door to us.
I also remember my brother mentioning that things used to disappear on him at the house. They'd disappear and be gone for days at a time, and then they'd reappear in the most obvious place. Some place that you couldn't have possibly missed it before.
Yeah, and like all the time I would put something somewhere and it would show up like 3 days later somewhere else, like completely like nice and neat, just how I left it, but I know I left it somewhere else. Like there'd be times I would leave something out in my bedroom and then like 4 days later it would show up on the kitchen table downstairs in the middle of the kitchen table. All the time that would happen. Stuff would just show up there on like the kitchen table.
Another person who spent a lot of time at the house wasn't actually part of our family. It was my mom's best friend at the time, this woman named Mary Beth. She was always around, especially the early stages when my mom was first moving in. She seemed to be there a lot helping out. I wanted to reach out to her and see if she ever had any strange encounters.
So what happened was we're sitting down playing around. I mean, we're sitting playing cards or doing something. I forget what we're doing. We're doing either playing cards or just talking or sitting around talking, whatever it may be. So all of a sudden, I felt this whole thing near my back. I was sitting towards not the window. I was sitting towards the wall, and suddenly I felt this thing on my shoulders, like a whole body like on me or something. And I'm thinking, oh God! I said, I felt a draft, and it was summertime or something. I think it was. I forget. It was warm. It was like, and I feel this. It's like a cold air just went by me or something, or standing over me. I felt this coldness near me, like in on my body, like on me, their hands are on me or something. I thought, I think there's a ghost in here.
Mary Beth was also present for what my mom says was the first indication she had that something was off at the house. It took place shortly after she moved in. So Mary Beth, my mom had mentioned a story. She said you were there and there was an incident with the stereo.
Yeah. I think it turned on by itself. Yes.
It was a couple of days after I had moved in, and I was unpacking the kitchen, and the living room still was not put together. My stereo was sitting in the middle of the living room floor, not plugged in, and the stereo, we heard music. Me and my friend Mary Beth were in the kitchen, and we heard music.
Because I remember I tried to have that stereo turn on, or something like that. We both looked at each other like, there's a ghost in here.
So music was playing, and it was the song, Someone to Watch Over Me. And I thought it was somebody outside, so I walked out into the living room, and the lights on my stereo weren't on. And it was my stereo that was playing the music, and it wasn't plugged in. Mary Beth was holding the cord.
And
it was not plugged in.
It didn't take batteries or anything?
No, it was like a stereo. It didn't take batteries.
So the song that my mom mentioned, Someone to Watch Over You, it seems to play an important role in this story because since the beginning, my mom said that she wasn't creeped out by whatever was happening in the house, that it was comforting to her. She felt like something was watching over her. And the thing that gave her that feeling more than anything else was an incident that happened in the bathroom. She was standing in the bathroom, and a light fixture fell from the ceiling without notice.
In the bathroom, I was doing my hair. And it was as if someone put their hands around, like on my shoulders, and pushed me out of the bathroom. And the light, right where I was standing.
Like
exactly.
Right after you got pushed out of the bathroom?
The light flew down and hit the floor. But somebody pushed me out of that bathroom. And there was nobody in there but me. You remember how small that bathroom was?
But it may not have been just my mom that whatever or whoever this was watching over. She believes that the spirit was watching after my brother and I as well.
Well, with this story, this had to be retold to me. So, I used to be super afraid of the dark all the time. And it was horrible, especially in that house. I don't know if you remember how dark that house was at night because the street didn't really have any street lights.
He always slept with a nightlight. My baby loved his nightlight. It was blue and had to have his nightlight on every night.
I could not sleep without a nightlight. So I guess one night I woke up after being talked to this ghost lady.
And he came into my room. It was in the middle of the night, and he handed me the nightlight, and he said, "Mommy, I don't need this. The lady said she's going to watch over me."
I vaguely remember waking Mom up and handing it to her. Like, I have a vague memory of handing Mom the nightlight and saying, "I don't need this anymore."
That one got me, because I knew that she was in your room. I don't know. That freaked me out. I didn't feel like she was going to hurt you, but it kind of freaked me out. And he never used the nightlight after that. That was the end of the nightlight.
Now, I should point out that my family isn't a bunch of ghost hunting wackos. They're not the type of people who talk about alien encounters and jump at the chance to believe every bizarre urban myth or story that comes along. In fact, for the most part, they're very skeptical when it comes to anything along those lines. They're your typical tight-knit Catholic family. My mom, in particular, is not one to make up a story just to get a rouse out of people. Now, I mention this because the next story is very, very unnerving.
The only other thing was when I saw her at the top of the steps.
I didn't see that lady. I just felt her. I just felt her when I walked by. And then I remember going to the bathroom or going upstairs, and I could feel something like when I walked up the steps.
She was sitting on the step.
Now let me explain a little bit about how the house was laid out. When you would first enter the front door, there was a wall to your left side, and that wall ran through the living room, past the staircase that went upstairs to the bedroom, and into the kitchen. That wall was the wall that divided the two houses. Remember, this had previously been one larger house. When you entered the living room, if you stayed along that wall, you would pass through a small hallway, just the width of the staircase, and then into the kitchen.
And she had on a blue dress, and she had an apron on that, like the one that goes around your neck and has the bib. And it scared me. So I walked past the steps, and then I started to run back out of the steps again, and she said, "My name is Ruth. I'm here to watch over you." That's what she said. And I grabbed my purse and ran out the door.
Now, I'm not one to call my mom a liar, but when I first heard that story as a teenager, it was very hard to believe. Although I did always look at the wall when I passed that staircase from that point on, because I didn't want to see anything in the corner of my eye. But it turns out my mom wouldn't be the only person to see the woman on the stairs. My grandmother would also end up having a terrifying encounter with Ruth.
She was sitting on the steps. I had gone over to your mom's for some reason. I don't remember if it was to let the dog out or what, but I remember I walked through the living room and passed the steps and glanced up to my right and saw her sitting on the step. She was everything was like white. You could see her shape there, but it was like mist around her. Like she had all this mist around her. And it scared me to death, and I just hopped on over into the kitchen and did what I had to do, and was a little scared to go back through. I mean, I didn't feel like she was going to hurt me, but I was just a little nervous there. And when I went back through the living room again, she was gone. She wasn't there anymore.
Now, the kitchen may not have been the best place to run to if you were trying to avoid the spirits in this house. There was a light in the kitchen. It was a light above the oven. And it seems to be a hot spot for activity in this home. Multiple people have told the same story over the years. Here's Mary Beth and my mom's account of it.
When she first moved in there, okay, we were cleaning around the thing, and the stove was there and everything, and the stove was never plugged in, okay?
Now, what she means is the light was never plugged in. The stove and the light had separate plugs. The light above, it never worked, so nobody ever bothered to plug it in.
It was an old farmhouse kitchen, and I had an old stove in there, and it had the lights, but they didn't work. That's how old the stove was. It was an electric stove. And the lights on the back of the stove came on.
And I said to Terry, I said, let me just see if the light works on the stove, right? Because it was a electric stove, I think it was. So I remember when I went there, I said, oh, let me try this light. Let me see if it comes on. Well, and I said, Terry, it can't come on, Mary, because it's not plugged in. You know, it's not plugged in. You won't be able to get nothing because it's not plugged in. I was thinking, okay. Well, I looked around and the light came on. I'm like, oh shit, the light came on. How'd that come on? It's not even plugged in. Then I got the willies right there. Then I got real goosebumps. I'm like, Terry, that light should not be on. I'm leaving.
So even though she didn't like to admit it at the time, if you ask my mom now, she's convinced that there were actually two spirits in that house. A protective, loving spirit that we now know as Ruth, and something a little more mischievous. She believes that this other spirit is what would cause things to move out of place and go missing. She also thinks this was responsible for making that light fixture give way in the bathroom. And then there was Ruth. Ruth was the one that pushed her out of the way of certain harm that day in the bathroom, and Ruth was the one who would return our missing items and place them on the kitchen table where she'd know we'd find them. Ruth was good. But who was Ruth? Was she some sort of guardian angel, or was she simply a friendly spirit who was not ready to pass on? Well, if you ask my mom, she believes it was actually a little of both. But it wasn't until sometime later that my mom would get another possible lead as to who the strange roommate actually was.
No, I was never there, but I always heard about her, and I wanted to meet her so bad because she was so good.
So our parents, your mom and my mom, and I believe your Aunt Dot, and even Mary Beth, she thinks that she was there for a couple of them, maybe not this one in particular, but they used to have like group psychic meetings where they'd all meet at someone's house and they'd chip in and they'd pay a psychic to come and give readings to, you know, whoever was there.
Yeah, but I think it was always the same psychic, and I think her name was Rose.
Okay, yeah. Well, one time they hosted this psychic party at my mom's house. And when my mom tells the story, she says that the psychic knocked on the door. She got up to open the door and greet her. The second the psychic stepped over the threshold into the living room, she froze. And she said to my mom, "You know someone else is here, right?"
The psychic, no, the psychic told me that she was the original owner of the house. And she said that her husband was a bread and milk delivery person that delivered in Pennsylvania. That was his job. She was a homemaker, and that original house he built, it was one house, and that they owned that land.
So there we go, right? That's Ruth. She was the original owner of the house, and she wasn't ready to move on, so instead she hung around and looked after whoever it was that was staying with her. That's where we left it anyway, and we tell the story of the house on 10th Street, and we'd say that it was haunted by Ruth, the original owner. And then I decided to do this episode, and I wanted to look more into things. I wanted to see if I could get to the bottom of just who Ruth was. I wanted to see if I could find any original deed records on the 10th Street house. I wanted to know for sure if there was any proof that could link Ruth to the house in some way, just for closure. Not only for this episode, but for myself, just to know that there was some merit to this story that I'd been sharing anytime a group of friends would somehow find our way down that winding conversational road and end up on the topic of ghosts or haunted houses. So that's what I did. I started researching. I was doing what I could to find the history of the house. I was able to find that the house had originally been built prior to 1900. I was able to find out that it indeed originally was one house that had been split into two. But as far as ownership, the history just didn't seem to be there. I was at a crossroads. I didn't know where to go next. At one point, I even considered changing the subject of this episode and just canning the story of the 10th Street house for the time being. And then something unexpected happened. You see, when I originally had the idea to do this episode, I made a list of people that I wanted to talk to, and at the top of that list was Roy. I didn't get to see Roy much anymore. He and his family had moved further south in Delaware, so he'd still be around for family get-togethers and holidays, but conversations always had a catching up vibe. It was always, "How have you been? How's everything going? It's good to see you." I realized I had never gotten a chance to really talk to him about the 10th Street house. I'd never asked him if he'd ever experienced anything there or if he remembered anything weird. So I reached out. I sent Roy a Facebook message telling him about the podcast and about the episode and asking him if he'd mind talking about his experiences as well as, general stuff like what year he'd bought the house, if he remembered who had purchased it from, if he knew any of the history at all. He was actually the first person I reached out to, but unfortunately, as the deadline grew closer and closer, there was no reply. I'd assumed that Roy probably just didn't check his Facebook Messenger very often, and so I asked Eric and my mom instead. I asked them if they'd ever heard Roy mention anything weird in the house. They both said that they were fairly certain he never had any experiences there. Nothing that he'd ever told them anyway. So rather than continue to press on and get in contact with Roy, I just kind of moved on. And then, 2 days before I started editing this show, I got a message on Facebook. It was from Roy, and it said, "Can I call you?" So I sent him my number, and, well, I'll let you listen for yourselves.
I bought the house in 1986, and as soon as I bought it, I started working on it, remodeling the inside. And there was a little old lady who lived next door, and she used to hear the banging. She was homebound. She couldn't come out of her house. Nurses and her church, the Jehovah's Witness, would come and visit with her in her house. So when I would come home from work, she would be on her front porch and always greet me, say hi, and then she'd ask me what I was doing in the house. And she'd always say, "I want to come over and see your house." But we had moved away.
So when he says he moved away, he's referring to when he moved out and started renting the property to my mom. Remember, he refurbished this house and then used it as a rental property.
Then after we had moved, the lady next door had died. So I think that the ghost that is in the house is the lady who lived next door.
Oh, so you think that the weird stuff that's happened to my mom in that house may actually be the spirit of the lady next door finally coming to see what you had done with the place?
Yes, that's what I believe.
Now, Roy, this may seem like a weird question, but you don't by chance remember the name of that lady, do you? The one next door?
Yes. I remember her first name. Her first name was Ruth. I can't remember what her last name was.